Welcome to Forests, Folklore, and Fantasy. My name is Kelly, but I write and publish under my initials, K.M. Rice. Thank you so much for giving me your time and listening today. This is a momentous occasion as I have my second ever guest on the show. She is an incredibly talented cosplayer and a dear friend of mine. So I hope you will join us and enjoy this conversation in which we talk about all things costumes, geekdom, our love of fantasy, and the shared experiences we've had as female content creators in our chosen fandoms. I am very pleased to welcome my guest today, Lauren Stewart, best known on the interwebs as LaurenDoesCosplay. Welcome, Lauren.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited that you're here. I wish we were together in person because
I know.
Lauren's another one of those wonderful, I'll call us fangirls that I've had the opportunity to spend some time with in person, and she's just absolutely a delight. And
I
and
feel the
I'm
same
sure you
about
will.
you.
I was gonna say, I'm sure you'll find that to be true once you're done listening to this interview. But
I know, yeah, we met at in San Diego, right?
yes, at Comic-Con in 2022, I want to say.
Yeah, which is like crazy because I feel like we just got on so fast and so quickly that it's like, oh, that can't be that we just met there. Like,
I know.
It seems like we've been friends forever.
Well, what blew my mind was because I think I'm like 10 years older than you.
Mm-hmm.
And what blew my mind was we ended up sharing a hotel room because if you don't know, that's how you do conventions on the cheap, especially San Diego Comic-Con, where the hotels jack the prices up to like $500 a night.
Yeah.
So you tend to pile as many people into a room as you can. And we try to have like a girl's room and a boy's room.
Mm-hmm.
And so we ended up being roommates. And I remember you were like, oh my gosh, when I was growing up, I watched Happy Holidays.
I did. I know. It was like one of those things because I don't even know if I knew I was rooming with you or who you were going into it. And I remember seeing your face and I was like, oh man, she looks so familiar. And I couldn't really place it. And then I think we were just talking casually and you were like, oh yeah, me and my sister used to like do a YouTube channel. And I was like, oh my God, I used to watch all of your videos. That's so weird.
It was just such a like special moment for me because I don't know, like it had been a while since I, like you said, like our heyday of Happy Hobbit was more when the Hobbit films were coming out.
Yeah.
And then to meet someone who we were always connecting with younger girls and younger women. And strangely for us, we're in a position where we were being seen as role models and we didn't anticipate that. And it wasn't something that like we took lightly. And then to meet one of those people who had been a young girl watching it and then now is flourishing with her own geekiness and her letting her own creativity fly and sharing her talent with the world in such a beautiful way was just such a fulfilling moment. Yeah,
it always feels good when it's like, because there's so much of being on the internet that you're just like, I'm sort of just in my own bubble and I'm just doing my own thing. And I'm, you're kind of just by yourself a lot of it. And then it's like when you get out into the real world and someone's like, like I have this experience sometimes where I'll be at a Renaissance fair and someone will be like, your videos inspired me to make chainmail. And I'm like, oh my God, I've been perceived. And I'm like seeing the results of that like in real time. And it's so like, oh my God, that's, it's just like a special feeling.
Absolutely. I talk about that a lot with writing because writing is this really secular activity where like it's literally you're just alone.
Yeah.
And then you put out a book and someone reads it alone. There's not much communication between like the author and the page and the reader unless they see you in person or write a review or send you a message. And the same is true in a lot of ways when you're producing content online, because even though people can comment, it's not the same as a human to human interaction.
Yeah, for sure.
Like face to face.
Yeah, there's definitely a different feeling there of like it's like, yeah, you know, people are seeing your stuff because you're getting those comments, but yeah, there's something about being in real life that someone's like, I watch your videos. It's like, oh my god, a person is like, oh, actually watching my videos. That's crazy.
And also, you inspired me.
Yeah, which is like a bonus. Like, what? How can that be?
So, for any of you listeners who don't know, Lauren's handle is Lauren Does Cosplay because, as it suggests, she is a very well renowned cosplayer and an
Oh.
incredibly talented. Are you comfortable with me calling you a seamstress?
Oh, you know what? I would have said no like a year ago, but I feel like I'm coming into my own with a sewing machine, so I'll allow
Really?
it.
You've been making the most incredible Anastasia dresses from.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little about how you got into cosplay to begin with?
Yeah, I sort of have a pretty distinct when I was in college, so I would say like it's probably 2016. So I was like nearing my senior year of college, and I was sort of getting into like Bookstagram and like kind of
Mhm.
finding community. And now it's sort of like book talk is the thing. It's more TikTok focused, but at the time it was like a book community on Instagram, and I was posting a lot of Tolkien books, and I started collecting editions of The Hobbit when I was in college. So I sort of started just like taking pictures of my books and posting them, and I found like this whole book community, and I started getting into like Tolkien groups, and I'm sure that's like about the time that I found your channel. And I was just kind of like, that was sort of me getting into the fandom as opposed to just being like someone who's a fan of something. It's like, oh, I'm like entering into a world of like fandom. um
Where
so
you're actually actively interacting and taking action to engage.
yes. Yeah. And like that feeling of like, oh my God, there's like other people that like, not that I don't know that like Lord of the Rings and Tolkien isn't popular, but like that feeling sort of like, it's not like the beginning of the internet, but it was just a different time on the internet. And it was just like, oh my God, there's like communities of people talking about Lord of the Rings. Like, that's awesome. I want to talk about Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Um, so
I'd
that
say it
was
was a
like,
little bit more wholesome back then.
it was just like simpler.
I'm nostalgic. I'm
Yes,
nostalgic for
I
that
know.
those days on the
Y-
internet.
Yeah, so it was like I was sort of just like entering into these Tolkien communities, and then I think I had a friend. I don't really know how it came up, but someone had said that there was a convention in Utah called FearCon, and I had never been to a convention before, but it was like right when The Force Awakens had come out.
Mhm.
So it was like technically, I guess I kind of made it for Halloween, but I still consider it like my first cosplay because I wore it to that convention. And I like that was the first time that I had ever like made a costume like that or like worn it anywhere. And I just remember it was like that same feeling of like, oh my God, there's people on the internet talking about books. It was like, oh my God, there are people who are dressing up and like doing this for fun. Like that was the most exciting thing I had ever seen, was just like, I had never heard of cosplay. I had no idea that that was like a hobby or it's something that people did. So that was very exciting to me to find out that that was like a thing that adults could do with their money. Um, so, I mean, I was still in college at the time, so I was, dirt poor and couldn't afford to like do cosplays like that. So it wasn't until I would say like 2019 I started getting into it a lot more. I had, been graduated for a few years and been living in Colorado, and we got our house and stuff. So it was like, okay, I'm sort of like established and I can kind of decide that this is the hobby that I want to do. Yeah, so 2019 is like when I made my Instagram and my TikTok, and yeah, I've grown a lot since then. I've learned there's like a joke in the cosplay community that cosplay is like 1,000 hobbies in a trench coat because it's not just like I cosplay is the hobby. It's like I do leatherworking and chainmail and content creation and sewing, and there's like all of these like micro hobbies under the umbrella.
All these different skill sets. Yeah.
Yeah, so that sort of like is the general timeline, but yeah, that's kind of how I got into it.
Well, that's amazing because there are so many different avenues that your creativity and thirst for learning then
Hmm.
can go,
Oh
all
yeah.
with, I'll call it the excuse, like, to create a costume. And
Yeah. Oh my gosh, definitely.
like, I'm just saying excuse because I feel like as adults, we are not ever really encouraged to play or to
Yeah.
explore things that bring us joy. I mean,
Hmm.
like, this is a tangent, but have you ever like tried to shop for sheets or curtains? And it's
Uh-huh.
like, how many shades of blue or gray? That's not a
Uh-huh.
pun, but like, how many shades of gray are available or taupe? And I'm like,
Right.
I'm going to the kids section. I want some unicorns. Like,
Right. Yeah, you wanna jazz it up a little bit.
but what I have found is through going to conventions myself and meeting people like you, fandom gives us that safe
Hmm.
space to explore and maybe not play in the way that kids play, but it feels like play. It brings us joy
Oh
and
yeah.
self-expression, and I think it's so incredibly healthy to put on a cosplay.
Hmm.
And even if in your head you're not pretending to be that character, just walk around as someone else
Yeah.
for a
Uh-huh.
few hours.
Yeah, and I'm not particularly someone that's into like LARPing, and if you know what that is, it's live action role play. And so there are some cosplayers that sort of lean into that, and it's like when they're in their costume, they are like embodying that character.
Their
And I've
method.
never, yeah, and it's like I've never really been into that part of it. I find all of the fun in like making the costume and connecting with people who also like the character, so that like the part of like posting it on social media, like as with how I'm doing like Anastasia stuff, it's like all these people that are just like, I love Anastasia, and it's like, me too, girl. Like that part is so fun to me, you know.
I'm one of them. I had a crush on Dimitri when I was little.
Who didn't? Who didn't have a crush on both of them?
I
Honestly.
was like, they're cartoons, and I have a crush on cartoon characters. Like,
Yeah, there's no shame in that. They are both. They're the best.
well, you are an exquisite Anastasia,
Oh, thank
and
you.
anyone who has not yet seen Lauren's cosplay of Anastasia from, it was in the 90s, right? That it came out, late
Yeah,
90s,
97.
97.
Hmm.
Do check it out on her social media. I'm going to
Thank
put
you.
links to your accounts in the show notes. But how do you decide what your next project's going to be?
Um, I guess it sort of depends if something new has come out, and it's like, sometimes you just watch a new piece of media and something will grab your attention, and it's like, I cannot rest until I make that thing. So there's like new elements, but I feel like I would still kind of consider myself like a baby cosplayer. Like there are people that have been cosplaying for 10 to 15 years. And I'm like, I feel like I'm still just getting into it. So there's still so many characters that I'm like, I've got like so many to choose from the last 20 to 30 years of media, of like movies and stuff that I love. So it's kind of just a matter of like, ooh, what is striking inspiration right now? Like what skills have I learned that are making new costumes accessible to me? Like, I actually sort of got started mostly making like armor, like doing EVA foam and like Warbla and doing armor and stuff, because I didn't know how to sew. So it was like, well, I can like buy base garments, like stuff from Amazon, but I don't know how to sew garments like that. So
Mhm.
like just sort of being on this journey of learning how to sew, it's like, oh, I can look at stuff that I thought was impossible a couple of years ago and be like, oh, I can sew that now. Like it's opened up so many more possibilities. So yeah, I still feel like I'm just cracking into getting to cosplay all of these characters from media that I've loved for the last 20 years.
And does the drive to take on each new project come from the technical challenge that, like, you mentioned, oh, you'll see something that catches your eye and you're like, I can't rest until I replicate that. Is
Mhm.
that because you just have this drive to understand how they made it, or a drive to challenge yourself to see if you're up to the task, or is it a mix of both or something different altogether?
Think the drive actually might be just like I want to wear that.
Oh,
I want it on my body right now.
yeah.
So like I feel like that's the initial spark is like I want to be wearing that. And
Hmm.
then yeah, definitely a large part of it is like all of those steps of like, there's the gathering the materials and finding patterns and just like, okay, how do I do this? How did they do it? And then, it's so fun specifically doing stuff for like from Lord of the Rings because it's been out for so long that every costume in every movie has been like researched and there's a blog about it somewhere. Like the research has sort of been done, which is the researching costumes is my least favorite part. I hate that part. So it's fun to do costumes from things that are a little bit older because there's going to be a costumer's guide from 20 years ago with like every high def picture and like every technique and notes from the costume designers. And it's like, someone's already figured it all out. So it's like, okay, I can just, maybe not follow step by step instructions, but I can like, just learning all of the things that go into a garment and like, how did they make it and how can I get as close as I can with the materials that I have access to?
It's funny because when I was in New Zealand working on that massive book, the
Mhm.
Middle Earth from Script to Screen Building the World of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, with my co-author Daniel Falconer, who had already written a lot of behind the scenes books on the Hobbit. He, from going to conventions and getting feedback, understood how important those types of books were in
Oh
particular to
yeah.
cosplayers.
Mm-hmm.
And
Does
that,
he write all those big wide ones that all came out
yes,
from The Hobbit? I have all of those on my bookshelf right now, and I love all of them.
he's amazing. He's an amazing author. He's an
Mm-hmm.
amazing chronicler, and he's also an amazing person, if I
And
do
and
say
I'm
so.
so happy. It's so funny to hear that in hindsight because like I have used those books for cosplay references, like from doing stuff from Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. It's like, okay, I'm pretty sure that's like because I did Thorin a few years ago. And it's like, I'm pretty sure there's like a bunch of pages about Thorin's outfit. I was referencing those books for like up close details about his
Yeah,
outfit.
that's amazing. And when we're working on, because obviously there are extensive behind the scenes, like video features on the DVDs back when they came out
Mm-hmm.
for the original trilogy, but there weren't any books that
Uh-huh.
actually chronicled the costumes
Yep.
and the props in the way that the Hobbit books did. And so that was something we talked about a lot, was wanting to make sure the publisher knew how important it was to
Mm-hmm.
include elements like that, especially from the Lord of the Rings trilogy, so that people like yourself would have access to things that previously they didn't have access to.
Yeah. Oh my
So
gosh. If someone, even if right now, if they made books with all of the costumes from The Lord of the Rings, people would go, the internet would lose its mind. That would be so valuable for the cosplaying community.
that is good to know. I might have to
Mhm.
put a little whisper into someone's ear about that.
I hope you do. Oh my gosh. Because, like, Game of Thrones, I'm a big Game of Thrones fan as well. And I have an amazing book. Like, the costumers made a costuming book for Game of Thrones. And it's got these ultra high def photos of all of the costumes and like little blurbs about the characters and whatever. And it is like that book as a source for costumers is pure gold. I mean, like, if that existed for Lord of the Rings, that would be incredible.
To switch gears a little bit, so
Mhm.
okay, Game of Thrones,
Mhm.
Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit,
Mhm.
Anastasia. I'd feel comfortable putting Anastasia under a fantasy umbrella because there's a lot
Oh,
of
yeah,
fantastical
yeah.
things that happen
Yeah,
in it.
Rasputin he's just like a wizard.
He is, and like, dude, if you read about the real guy, like,
Bad,
I can't
bad
get over
man.
that this man like was real, and that
Yeah.
the things happened around him that happened. It does make you question like if wizards actually exist, and he'd probably be a dark wizard.
She's sold his soul for sure.
What do you think it is that has drawn you to the genre of fantasy in particular?
Hmm. in particular, I don't know. I've just always been, that's just always the genre that I have leaned towards my whole life. I think it's got whimsy and fun and, these elements of things that can't happen in real life. And sort of one of those things that's like engaging to all the senses. It's like
Mm.
visually stimulating and like, I feel like fantasy is always accompanied by incredible music and like sound scores, and the costumes are so interesting. Like you see all the costumes and it's like, I just wish we could dress like that in real life.
Right?
So it's like so different from what we experience on like from the day to day that, yeah, I've just always gravitated towards it.
I've talked before on this show how fantasy, in a lot of ways, I think is our modern form of myth telling and
Mm,
myth
mm,
making, because
mhm.
it always exists in a time that's not our time. Like
Uh-huh.
once upon a time in a
You're right.
galaxy far, far away, in
Uh-huh.
a completely imaginary alternate world called
Mhm.
Arda or Middle Earth.
Yeah.
So it's always removed in space and time,
Uh-huh.
and there are elements of the supernatural. And
Mhm.
those elements of the supernatural are just accepted as the norm in these worlds. And to me, that's like a direct parallel to myth, and the role that myth plays in our lives is
Mhm.
often telling us about our inner landscapes just as much as it is about origins or um, like where things come from and trying to
Yeah.
explain parts of the human condition. And
Mm.
so I was wondering, I know I'm getting like really deep here, but I was wondering if you had, if you see, if any of that resonates with you, if you feel like there are any deep roots in fantasy that maybe just feel like they're calling you
Mm.
home. And
Mm.
because not because it's like an escape, but maybe because it's a mirror to parts of ourselves and parts of life that we just don't necessarily talk about in the everyday and maybe don't even have words to talk about.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's like sort of what I think about when I think of fantasy is like I've never really been interested in not, I don't want to say not interested, but like our real world history is so dark in so many
Mm.
ways that it's
Hmm.
like for me not very fun to consume, and not
Hmm.
that it's not important to like know the history of our world and like so that bad things don't repeat. And, I don't want to say that that's not important, but it's just not anything that, it's not something that has ever really uh, been like captivating to me to like really dive into. But it's like when I think of like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, it's like I could tell you the history of Westeros like way better than the history of anything that has happened in real life. And I
Yeah.
think it's that feeling of like, well, it's not real. It's not real people. So like these horrible things that have happened in the history of Westeros, they're not real. So like it's not as like it's not as daunting to talk about because it's
Yeah.
like not a real atrocity that has
Right.
happened. So it maintains like there are stakes at hand in these worlds, but it's not like I don't know, it's just not real. And like I've talked about that before because I don't want to say like I love violence, but like in like I'm pretty unfazed by like violent media. Like I would say Game of Thrones is in a very violent world, and watching that does not really bother me at all because it's like I know it's not real. So it's much more easy for me to consume. But like for example, I cannot watch people like box like a boxing match because it's too like I'm just like, why would anyone want to watch people punch each other in the face? Like that is so like I just can't watch it. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
too because it's real. I don't know. There's
Yeah.
something about it, and it's like, but I can watch someone get beheaded on Game of Thrones, and it's like, oh no, but it's not like it's not real. So I can like immerse myself in it without that feeling of like real dread, I guess.
Right. Some of that probably comes from your natural interest in the behind the scenes nature of things and
Mhm,
like
mhm.
understanding what goes into the production of a film or a
Yeah.
scene. And so then you're carrying that knowledge with you as a viewer. But I'm seeing a pattern emerging. You're only my second ever guest on this show, by the
Oh.
way. So thank you
Oh.
so much. But like, um, I interviewed Caitlin from Tia Tolkien, and what was
Uh-huh.
interesting was I asked her a similar question, and she was talking about Tolkien in particular, and I think fantasy on the whole, but I think her jam is mainly just Tolkien.
Mhm.
Um, that it creates a safe space, basically, or a different lens through which to view the real world from a comfortable distance.
Mm. Mhm.
Like you were just saying with history, like you don't really want to read about some horrible atrocity that
Mhm.
actually happened and people actually died, and there are probably ripple effects still in our
Yeah.
society. But when you know it's contained
Mhm.
with fictional parentheses, it feels safe to explore those emotions and the ramifications of that situation in a way that and it doesn't you don't feel comfortable with, and I'll call
Mhm.
it real life, even though
Yeah.
like
Yeah, it's sort of like, there's been a lot of discussions I've seen people talking about, like media literacy is getting thrown around a lot.
mhm.
And people talking about like, just because something bad is portrayed in media, it doesn't mean it's like being condoned. You know, it's like like you said, it's like a safe space to explore maybe a taboo subject or something that is, that makes the reader or the watcher uncomfortable in a
Mhm.
way that is like, okay, I'm okay though, and everyone obviously is going to have their own interpretations and reactions to any given thing, but you know that you're okay and you can sort of explore uncomfortable, or big world, like big wars in a piece of media, and you can just be like, okay, and I can close the book and I can go, like, not have my whole brain consumed by that.
Yeah, because by its nature, fantasy, in particular high fantasy, tends to deal with only the big stuff.
Mhm, mhm.
Like, it deals with life and death and birth and
Yeah.
loyalty and friendship, honor, heroism.
Yeah, the
Um,
extremes of, like, everything that you can think of.
yeah, and somehow having it be that one layer removed from our sense of safety or our identity in our daily lives gives us that freedom
Mhm.
to explore it and to look at these issues. And I guess that's another reason why I feel like it's our modern form of mythology.
Mhm.
Because if it's happening in a different place, in a different time, you don't have to have all of the real world connotations associated with it. And it's a
Mhm.
bit more liberating to your mind to look at it in the context it's presented to you, rather than, especially like in this day and age when I feel like we have like hy hyper sensationalism in all
Mhm.
of our mainstream media.
Yeah.
There's always an angle, there's always
Mhm.
something meant to trigger you, and so removing that and being able to and I'm not just to be clear, I'm not saying that authors don't sometimes have agendas,
Right.
but to strip away that I guess your identity is Lauren as you're reading, or my identity is
Mhm.
Kelly as I'm reading, and just dissolve into this alternate space
Mhm.
is it's liberating. And then it's I don't know, like I'm getting
It's just
really deep here, but it's like
be
going on the
fun.
hero's journey, because it's like you
Yeah.
leave your comfort zone, you go on this journey, you come back hopefully changed for the better.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And like, I feel like, when like myth telling and myth making was most prevalent in the world, it's like it was so. I would say a lot of it is maybe like an explanation for things that couldn't be explained at the time.
Hmm.
I'm sure you know a lot more about that than I do, but that would sort of be my assumption, is like, people making up stories to explain things that couldn't be explained at the time. And now it's like, well, most things can be explained, so now we can sort of tell stories for fun. So I'm like, sometimes it can just be for fun, and that's just as important, to have stories that can be passed through generations that are like, okay, we know this isn't real, but it doesn't mean it's not
But actually,
captivating and fun.
you just said something really important.
Oh.
We do have a lot of explanations through science, right?
Yeah.
But I think the same reason you and myself included are uncomfortable consuming real world violence or
Mm-hmm.
even being exposed to it is because we can't explain it.
Mm.
And
Mm.
and so in that way, I think fantasy with these epic battles and showdowns and like you said, sometimes hyper violent, like Game of Thrones,
Mm-hmm.
is a way of looking at something we still don't have an answer for and we still don't understand. Like who in their right mind can ever justify war
Right. Mm-hmm.
and aggression and murder
Yeah.
and all these horrible things that humans are sadly very capable of doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what your words just triggered for me was I'm like,
Mm.
well, we don't know. We can't
Yeah.
answer these questions.
Yeah, and maybe sometimes it's easier to read a story and be like, oh, well, you can just sort of like follow the linear events of like why, all these characters doing these things that made the war happen. Like, it's just so like a little bit more digestible.
Yeah, and since we can't explain why we do this, at least
Mm-hmm.
this is just sounds so messed up, but at least it's letting us know that it's not alone. Like we're
Yeah,
not alone.
right.
It even happens in fiction sometimes.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. It's like senseless, bloody wars.
yeah, ambition,
Yeah.
ambition and greed.
It doesn't always come back to that one.
I know. Okay, let's lighten it up a little because I just
Okay.
took us like into the depths.
In the trenches there.
We just went into the trenches. I imagine you have had some incredible adventures on your cosplay journey. Do
Mm.
any in particular stand out to you that you think would be a good tale to tell for our listeners?
Oh, well, shoot. I think you were along the ride for kind of the craziest one.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, as Kelly knows, this trip that we did, San Diego Comic-Con 2022, this was the year that Rings of Power was coming out. And that year, one of the first promotional images that came out was of Galadriel in her armor. And I was immediately like, it was that feeling of like, it came out and I was like, I am making that. It is not a choice. I am making that. Like, I'm obsessed with it. So I had just made this armor because I wanted to and I was really excited about it. And
It's very svelte, like it's
oh,
very elegant
yeah,
for
it's just like so stunning. I love her armor so much. Yeah, but I would say because this was 2022. Yeah, so even at that time 2 years ago, it's like I very much still just dipping my toes into the cosplay world. Like I had never done anything. I was just at home making my costumes and
it
posting them
did
online.
not come across that way. When I met you, I was like, this woman is this really accomplished cosplayer. Like
No, I had not done anything. I had never done anything like that. So, like for me, it was just like, what am I doing here? I don't
oh
deserve this.
oh
Yeah, so I had made the armor, and then it sort of a sequence of events unraveled. So I had posted a picture of myself wearing it on, I think on like either the Lord of the Rings Prime Reddit, or I don't know. I posted it on Reddit and it got the attention of the OneRing.net, and they were like, "Hey, we want to bring you out to Comic-Con." And I was like, "Oh my god, I've always just dreamed of going to San Diego Comic-Con. Like that is, it's the con in the country." So
right, it's like the geek mecca.
yeah, and it's like one of those ones where it's like it's impossible to get tickets. It's like, so I had never been, and they were like, "We got a ticket for you. You just got to get yourself out here." So I kind of put my feelers out to my audience, and I was like, "This is happening." Like I would, be so thankful if anyone could help me, help pay my way out there. And I raised the money to get out there in like 10 hours or something. It was pretty crazy. And so yeah, I went to San Diego Comic-Con and brought my armor. And the whole time I was there, I was kind of just like, I don't really know what I'm doing here. But like, was like, it was so kind for the OneRing.net to like want me to be there, but I was just like, I don't really know what I'm doing here. This is
But I
great.
should say, too that for people who don't know, that armor and you wearing it is not an easy thing.
Oh no, it's horrific to wear.
And San Diego Comic-Con's really hot, really humid.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And if you were to wear that even for a day, you'd probably be like severely dehydrated.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like, yeah, I wasn't even like wearing it, but they had said to bring it. And I was like, I just like don't know what I'm doing here. And at the same time, they're doing all this promotional stuff for the Rings of Power, and Amazon had a whole crew of people out there, and you were one of them, people that they had there to like cover all of the press and stuff for Rings of Power. And I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And then there was this big party that was happening on like Friday or Saturday night that was to promote Rings of Power. And Justin, who runs the OneRing.net, he was like, you got to wear your armor to the party. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I was really putting a lot of pushback on that because it's so uncomfortable and it's so hot. And it's like,
And it's a party, you don't want to be a sweating metal bucket.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like it's a party, and like I knew people were, I was like, I want to just be able to like enjoy the party. Like I don't want to be in my super uncomfortable costume that I can't sit down in, and like,
Yeah.
And he was like, trust me, just wear it to the party. And I was like, okay, I will, So yeah, night at the party, get there, and it was awesome to wear it there because there was a bunch of people that were all excited about the show. So everyone was very excited to see me in the armor, and that was exciting in and of itself,
Because again, it was like one of the only recognizable images because we hadn't seen really much of anything at all.
Yeah, because at San Diego Comic-Con they had done the Hall H thing or whatever, and it was like that was like the first trailer and stuff that they had released. So it was like it was only us who had been to Hall H.
Yeah, did you get into Hall H that year?
I did. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I've never attempted Hall H in all the like 10 years I've gone to San Diego Comic-Con. I have not been brave enough.
Yeah, it was kind of a nightmare, like sidetracking from the story real quick because everyone was like, okay. Yeah, everyone was like, okay, we're gonna like wait for the Hall H, whatever. And I remember everyone from One Ring was like taking shifts to like stand in line all day. And
oh my gosh, that's right.
I like got on my shift and I was like, I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't care about anything enough to wait in this line all day. Like I'm just, in general, I'm not a line person. I don't like waiting in line. So I was like, I do not care. I am not waiting in this line all day. And so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna give up my spot. Like I'm bailing. I'm not doing this. And especially because I have a friend who was in the Her Universe fashion show that night. And I was like, well, I'm going to go like see my friend in this show. Like, I'm not going to be standing waiting in a line. So it was like after the show and he won and it was like, great. We were all on a high. And I was like, well, I'll just like pop back in the line, see what's going on. And like right as I got in line, and I was like way in the back, but they like came through and were handing out tickets and I got a pass into Hall H. I was like, okay, well, glad I didn't have to stand in the line all day.
That was meant to be.
I know. That was the only reason that I got to go because I was like, I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do it. And then, yeah, it was kind of just like, here's the ticket to Hall H. I was like, okay, great.
Well, this may ruin my geek street cred, but like, I'm the same as you. I'm like, unless it's like a cure for disease or something, I don't think I have it in me. Even when I was younger, to like, people camp out.
I know that's just not for me. I would rather be like having fun and like enjoying my trip. I'm not going to stand like in a line all day. I'm not going to do that.
Exactly.
Anyway, so yeah, I had gone to Hall H. I think it was like that morning. So, it's a very small group of people at this point who have seen anything other than like the few photos that had been released up to that point. Yeah, so get to the party and it's like everyone knew what I was wearing, and that was really cool. And I remember we were all sort of standing up in that upper section. It was like sort of all of like the content creators. We were all standing up there. And so I remember someone came up and was like, come with me. I was like, oh, okay. And I remember just like walking through the building and everyone had this look. Everyone was looking at me like I was the only one that didn't know what was going on. And I was like, oh, geez, what's happening? I was just like, and I'm like a very anxious person. So I was just like, can someone just like tell me so I don't freak out? I feel like everyone's like smiling at me and I'm like, what's happening? So they like pull me all the way back through the building, and we roll up to like this there's like a bouncer standing outside of the door, and they're like, she's ready, and I'm like, oh my
She's
God,
ready.
what's happening? And they brought me into this room, and it was Mordvith Clark and a bunch of cameras, and it was like they were bringing me in to meet her, which
And who does Morphith play?
she plays Galadriel, yeah, in the show. So, to say the least, I was incredibly overwhelmed. Just like it was a lot for me just to kind of take in, not knowing at all what was going on. And now I'm like in this room, and I'm like standing talking to her, and there's like 5 to 10 people with like cameras pointed at us, just like filming us. And I was
Oh
like,
my gosh.
what are we doing? Like,
Oh
what
my
is this?
gosh.
And she, she's just like talking to me. She's like asking me about the armor, and I'm like, I don't know, it's thermoplastic. Like I don't know, And I remember just being like, are we like, what are we doing? And she was like, oh, I just wanted to like meet you and chat with you, but I'm, she's obviously used to just like being a normal person and having a million cameras on her. But I was like, what? There's all these people just like standing here, like watching us have a conversation. This is so strange to me,
Yeah.
So I just remember it being like very overwhelming, and I was just like, I don't know. I like totally blacked out. Like, I literally only remember her saying like, how did you make it? And I was like, geez, it's kind of like that's a loaded question, It's not like I don't have like a canned one-line answer for like how I made a whole suit of armor. So I was just like,
Right.
I don't know. I was like, I made it out of foam, and then I did this warbler. It's like a thermoplastic. It's just like, God, shut up, Lauren. Like that it never. And then she signed like my bracer, which is really cool.
Oh.
And then yeah, they were like, okay, we gotta like wrap it up. And then like I was walking out the door, and then the 2 showrunners walked in, and I like met them. I was just like crying the whole time, which is really embarrassing, but I was just like so overwhelmed.
Oh, that shouldn't be embarrassing. That's like, it's the most natural human response.
Yeah, and
Like,
I'm just like a crier. Like I really can't help it. I cry when I'm angry, I cry when I'm sad, I cry when I'm overwhelmed. So it's just like, gosh, I
yeah,
wish I could be cool about this, but I'm just not.
you are still being cool about it. There's no shame in being human.
Yeah. Um,
Although I suppose you were dressed as an elf, so.
yeah, that's true. Yeah. And I was like not keeping it together in an elf-like fashion. So yeah, so that was like, I mean, that whole thing was just like very cool and very special to me. Like I kept equating it to being like, this would be like getting a one-on-one, getting to meet like Kate Blanchett in the height of like right before Fellowship of the Ring comes out. It's just
Oh
like,
my gosh.
this just feels like, what am I just, it was just very overwhelming. I didn't feel like I deserved it. I felt like yeah, just like perplexed and overwhelmed by the whole situation. But that was, I mean, it was, I feel so thankful for it. And, that sort of led into, I got to, we both got invited to the New York premiere, which is like, I've never been to a premiere before. So like, that was so cool. And yeah, it was, I feel so thankful for that whole experience and like the doors and the opportunities that opened me up to. So that's, yeah, by far the coolest thing that I've ever gotten to do through cosplay.
Well, you mentioned you felt like you didn't deserve it. I completely disagree. I think it was very well deserved, and what I love about it is it was a moment for us fangirls because Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings have the perception of being very male dominated
Star Wars
spaces.
as well. Yeah.
Yes, Star Wars as well. And I'm sure that there was some talk behind the scenes amongst the folks at Amazon that precipitated that, possibly attempting to shed light on the fact that this story is, I won't say being told through the eyes of Galadriel, but she's certainly, I would argue she's the main character.
Yeah, I would say she's the main character.
And we have not seen that with any venture into Middle Earth at all, like remotely.
Yeah.
So that was a big change, and having that meeting between a female cosplayer and the star of their show
Yeah.
just felt like such a moment.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you'd feel comfortable speaking to being a female content creator in
Mm.
these. I mean, different people have different statistics. Like, I've
Yeah.
never seen my data showing on our social media it to be more skewed toward men. It's usually
Mhm.
50-50. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
more women.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that there are just more men, generally speaking, who are more protective
Mhm.
of their fandom
Mhm.
and don't like,
Protective is a generous word.
yes,
Use. Yeah, there
territorial.
you go. That sounds more correct.
Yeah. And there are certain individuals who just don't like, I won't even say new faces, but what
Mhm.
they perceive to be new faces joining the fandom, being that women or people of color or
Mhm.
non-binary folks.
Mhm.
And just anything you'd like to say to speak to that, because I'm sure you've had experiences,
My
even just
gosh.
being a woman who's
Yeah.
putting her face online.
Like,
You
where
get
do we
stories.
even start? I'm like, I could write a dissertation on what it's like to be, just like a woman who is a nerd and in nerd spaces because I truly deal with it every day.
Mhm.
And there are obviously spikes. If I'm particularly engaging in a certain fandom, and it's like sometimes it'll just go off the rails with how aggressive men are towards me.
Yeah.
They just I don't know what it comes from, but they have so much aggression and so much hatred to um to women just being in these spaces and enjoying the same things as them, which inherently doesn't make any sense because on one hand they're all in their little chat forums being like, how do I get a nerdy girlfriend? And I'll get those comments like, how do I find women like you? And then you've got, the next comment is like, you're a fake fan and you're an ugly horror fake fan. It's like,
Oh.
okay. Like, oh no. I'm sorry, I just like Star Wars. That's my bad. No, I very much do not care what they think. But yeah, it can be a very tumultuous landscape to navigate
And
because
toxic, it sounds like.
yeah, and I honestly, unfortunately, think it drives a lot of women out of fandom spaces. And I can definitely say it has for me. I would say particularly with Star Wars, it's like I used to
Mhm.
make a lot of Star Wars content, and I would say the majority of my followers I made from posting Star Wars content. And if someone went to my page right now, I don't even know if they would know that I like Star Wars because I don't post about it anymore because it just gets so nasty and it's like, okay, I'll just like Star Wars in my head then because it is not really worth engaging with the kind of people that come out of the woodworks to like comment about you and your opinions and your face and anything that there could be to comment about. So yeah, it certainly, and I think that's an experience that a lot of women have had of being and it's like not even community because I had all of my friends like the same things. It's like we can all sit and we can talk, but it's very specifically like fandom gets very
Mhm.
toxic. And
Mhm.
I think Star Wars is sort of the blueprint and it never falters and just being disgusting. Um, and I think it's really unfortunate that Lord of the Rings is sort of uh falling into that same pool. Because I would say, like, we were talking nostalgically about like joining Tolkien groups in 2016 or whatever, and it was just like, yeah, I had friends from all over the place, all over the world, men and women. We all had group chats and we just talked about Tolkien and whatever. And it's like, I would have said my whole life that Tolkien and Lord of the Rings was the most wholesome fandom.
Same.
And I would say with Rings of Power coming out, it did the most nasty 180 I have ever seen a fandom take so quickly.
Mhm.
Because I would say there's if you get into the roots of it, there has always been like weird white supremacist stuff, like white supremacist people that like are really into Tolkien for weird reasons. And like, so like that's always been there, but I would say not the majority by any means whatsoever. Was that like a prevalent part of the community? And then for some reason with the Rings of Power, it's just like, oh, it's just like women hating, minority hating. It's like homophobic, just like horrible people coming out. It's supposedly in defense of Tolkien, and just saying like the foulest shit I've ever seen. And of course it's always directed at minorities and women, and so it becomes exhausting, honestly, to like deal with people like that on the internet.
It
And
takes such a mental and emotional toll. And when
yeah,
it's your platform, you feel like it's your
yeah,
responsibility to either engage with those voices or mute them or delete
yeah,
them or block them.
yeah. And I'm a chronic blocker. I'll block if anyone's even coming at me a little bit sideways. It's like, no, I'm not having that in my zone, you know.
Mhm.
But I also am not going to tolerate, when I was talking about Rings of Power a lot when I was coming out, it's just like you would just get people that would say unprompted, just like they would just say some crazy shit. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, do you think I'm going to receive that well? Like, I'm not on your side, buddy. Like, I have no interest. So it's like a part of you wants to call it out because it's disgusting. But it's like, I also can't take on the mental load of like constantly being on the receiving end of people saying nasty shit all the time. Um, so yeah, it's like you said, it's just like mentally exhausting to deal with people who don't want you enjoying the same things that they do.
But it's such a quick road to burnout then.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, it deters voices that
Mm-hmm.
otherwise could have been uplifted.
Yeah.
And that with this little group of influencers that Amazon was working with in 2022, women were certainly in the minority.
Mm-hmm.
And some conversations were had of like, well, what are the statistics of the fandom? And
Mm-hmm.
everyone seemed to have a different take on that. And again, maybe my information is biased because we were reaching people like yourself who were young
Mm-hmm.
women at the time and were happy to see themselves reflected in the fandom. And so maybe that's why I was seeing in our like YouTube stats that it was
Mm-hmm.
like usually
Or women.
75% female.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But at the same time, a part of me really wonders over how changes in technology have facilitated this shift in the fandom.
Mm-hmm.
Because as use of algorithms have changed, we all know that they elevate the most extreme voices. They
Mm-hmm.
reward the most sensational or divisional voices. And I
Mm-hmm.
personally, I think it's an artificial division. I don't
Yeah.
really think that there are that many people who truly feel that way or who would
Yeah.
feel comfortable saying it if they were face to face. But
Mm-hmm.
then it has a ripple effect because if one person says something extreme, someone who has maybe not as an extreme opinion feels safe
Yep.
to say whatever their gross thoughts are.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's always the question of how much of this is real and how much is actually being fabricated to sow discord, because there
Mm-hmm.
is evidence in the Star Wars fandom of foreign governments hiring people to sow discord among this pop culture phenomena to try to
Yeah.
sow discord then among the American populace. That sounds fringe and conspiracy theory, but it's documented.
Yeah. And I mean, we all know of, and I will say it's always men online, and
Oh,
their
yeah.
whole shtick is saying the most hateful shit in a fandom, and like we know who I'm talking about. And like, there are Star Wars guys, there are Lord of the Rings guys, and they'll just say like the nastiest stuff. And I mean, it's proven that like negative reviews, I don't know if you want to say, but like negativity garners more attention than positivity most of the time,
Yeah.
especially online. So it's like you got these guys that are just saying shit to say it, and it's because they're making money off of it, and it's really
That's true.
unfortunate. It's like, yeah, my positive review is not going to get the same attention as someone just like saying all the worst stuff that they can about something that comes out. But it's like I don't have any I don't have the energy to feed into that. Like,
No, because what are these algorithms being run by AI? Like,
mhm.
that can go on forever. We're humans.
Yeah.
And, before the show Rings of Power came out, I was excited for it. I posted 1 or 2 videos on our Happy Hobbit channel, just being like, this is why I'm excited for it. This
Mhm.
is why I have faith in it. And on a much smaller scale than probably what you deal with, it just got swarmed.
Mhm.
And I remember doing a little bit of investigating, and most of the people leaving comments were not subscribers. I
Mhm.
didn't recognize
They
any of
never
them.
are. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
always like people that don't follow you have like the most to say. It's like, how did you even get here? Like, leave me
I
alone.
know. I'm like, why did you guys just go around looking for this content and
Yeah, they're
hate on
just
it?
yeah.
And it was just that little foray. And maybe if I kept doing it, it would have become easier. But I was like, I have so much other stuff going on in my actual life that I don't have the capacity to
Mhm.
deal with this level of vitriol
Yep.
and hate over a piece of entertainment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Like my mentality has always been, if you don't like it, just watch something else. Like
nobody's
like
forcing you to
yeah,
watch it.
and like all these people acted like there was literally a gun to their head to watch this piece of media, and it's like you don't even have to turn it on, my guy. Like if
Yeah.
you hate women, if you hate them so fucking much you can't stand the Galadriel's, literally don't turn it on. Like I don't
Yes.
know what compels people to be so angry about something that they absolutely do not have to interact with. It's like I watch a lot of media. I consume a ton of media, and there's so much stuff that I watch, and I'll watch, I'll maybe watch a couple episodes and I'll be like, nah, not for me. And
Yeah.
I just like move about my day, and I don't like go to YouTube and like film an hour-long video about how much I absolutely fucking hated this new thing. It's like, I don't know, I just don't like it. So I just watch something else. There's a million other things to watch and consume. Like if you don't like it, just just move on.
Move
I don't
on.
yeah, I don't get the being so compelled to like trash on things that you don't like. It's like, okay, well, whatever, work for someone. That's okay if you don't like it. I don't know.
What's weird is earlier we were talking about how fantasy gives you this buffer between
Mhm.
like reality and difficult concepts or difficult things to like interface with, and you can do that because you feel safe because you're removing your identity.
Mhm.
And then there are also people who feel a sense of ownership over, I'll just
Mhm.
use Tolkien as the example because that's what
Yeah.
we're talking about, over that piece of fantasy. And it is apparently in some way linked to their identity.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
then they feel like their identity and their sense of self is being threatened by an adaptation
Mhm.
that may not match exactly what they had in their head. And I'm telling you, in my time as a freelance writer,
Mhm.
when you're trying to adapt something from someone's head, they usually have no idea what they're doing. They usually
Right.
just have very vague concepts,
Right.
and they can just tell you what you do that's wrong. They can't really tell you what to do.
Mhm.
And it's the same with all these people with their opinions about an adaptation like this.
Yeah.
And but yeah, that's what does that say, man? Like that there's people who feel that Tolkien is part of their identity to the point that they would risk being so nasty to
Yeah,
others.
it's which is so funny because like Tolkien's whole stories are about like positivity and like hope winning in
Inclusivity.
the end. Yeah, and it's like, I mean, gosh, dude, we won't get on the tangent, but it's like, where's the disconnect? Like, how are these people so angry about an adaptation that they don't agree with when it's like the person that wrote it would hate these people. They would hate, oh my God,
Right?
Tolkien would hate these people saying all this nasty stuff. And it's like, well, who are you to defend Tolkien? And it's so funny, like, I'll get comments like that. Like, I've done like a sexy Gandalf cosplay, which like to me, it's just funny, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
It's just like a funny little thing. And people will be like, Tolkien is rolling in his grave. And it's like, that man would, like, dress up as a polar bear and, like, run down the street with his friend. Like, he is not, like, I don't think he's this, like, oh, like, uptight, prude, non-fun having guy that you think that he is. And either way, he's not around to be the judgment of how people interpret his work and to have fun with it. So I don't really care if you think Tolkien is rolling in his grave. Like, I'm not doing anything that crazy.
And also how presumptuous.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, literally, like, who are you to even have that opinion on what he would think about it?
And also, like, Tolkien, what I think is so fascinating is, he lived into his 80s and we can look at his body of work and he
Uh-huh.
changed dramatically as a person
Yeah.
over time, as hopefully all people do.
Mhm.
And I think these people sometimes, if they're trying to even like find something to back up their opinion, are picking a moment in time that
Mm.
this human was a human
Mhm.
and then ignoring the rest of the time that they went on humaning.
Yeah, right.
And
Right. Yeah.
um, to your Gandalf cosplay, as we start to wrap up, when I first met you, I asked what kind of cosplay you did, and you said you like to do a lot of gender bending.
Mhm.
And you showed me pictures of this amazing Thorin Oakenshield cosplay
Mhm.
that you had. And so I was curious if you wanted to unpack that a little bit.
Oh. It's funny. I was literally just thinking about it today. I don't even know what costume. Oh, I was I was watching a TikTok, and it was like a clip of behind the scenes during The Hobbit, and it was just a clip of the costuming of Thranduil, and I've always wanted to cosplay Thranduil.
Oh,
That's so
that'd
funny.
be amazing.
I was literally just thinking about this today, and because I get anytime I post a gender bent Lord of the Rings character, men do not like it. They do not like it at
Mhm.
all. But to me, like, I so do not care about, like, the gender of a character, especially when it comes to Lord of the Rings. Like, I don't want to be boxed into the three, like, women in it. Like, that's very limiting to me, especially as
Right.
someone who, like, I love armor and swords, and it's like, okay, well, I don't really, like, want to cosplay Galadriel that bad. Well, I mean, I know I've done armor Galadriel, but, like, um, it's like I like all the characters from Lord of the Rings. So if I want to do an Aragorn cosplay, it's because I love Aragorn. Like, I feel no limitation by the fact that, like, he's a man. It just doesn't. It almost does not phase me at all. Like, I love Thorin Oakenshield. He's one of my favorite characters in Tolkien, and, like, like The Hobbit. I absolutely love Thorin. So it was like, I want to make Thorin because I love Thorin and I love his costume, and I'm so excited to make all of the elements of his costume. So it's like, it's not even like something that it's just, like, not a limiting factor to me, because I don't think people should be limited by gender or race or height or any physical characteristics of a character that they like should
Hmm.
stop them from um cosplaying something. Unless it's like, I mean, there's a whole discussion that can be had there of, like, what is inappropriate or what is so vital to the character that maybe some people should steer clear. But it's like Aragorn being a guy, it's like, nah, that does not that's not a limiting factor to me.
Hmm. That just brought to mind a conversation I had with another Thorin cosplayer
Hmm.
back in the Hobbit years. And um, she would do like the full beard,
Hmm.
prosthetics, everything. And what was amazing, but also kind of heartbreaking, was she'd worn this costume a lot.
Hmm.
And she's like, I'll tell you what, if it's late at night and I'm leaving like the con and I'm heading to my car or something,
Hmm.
I have no fear
Mm.
walking down a street at night alone looking like this.
I bet, yeah.
And she's like, I've actually passed men
Hmm.
and they will step out of my way.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's how you know you've
And
really got them.
yeah, and she said it just was so empowering and
Hmm.
liberating.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
And
just, like, fun. And what I would say is the most liberating as a cosplayer is doing, like, a masked character. Like, something
oh,
where
yeah.
someone can't see your face there's something so thrilling about that.
Hmm.
Like I've done like a sexy witch queen is sort of one that I
Ooh.
very much like started my cosplay journey, and that's a masked, and I wore it to a convention one, and it was so fun to like just it's like, it's obviously a character that everyone recognizes, but to be behind it and like not have anyone know that it was me was just like, I don't know, there was something really fun about that day. And another, I guess, unintentional gender bend.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't even have even thought about it. It's just like, oh yeah, doing Witch King. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's like, I feel like we're coming full circle because I started by saying how cosplay and exploring things in fandom are, in a way, a state of like a way to play as an
Mhm,
adult.
mhm,
And there's something so vital that we've lost as a society by having these opportunities to truly shed our identities, not
mhm,
just shed our identity while we're going into a work of fiction, but to
mhm,
truly have that anonymity, to give ourselves permission to be something other
mhm,
than what we are.
mhm,
And one of the things I talk about on this show is folklore and the history, the indigenous European history in particular, behind certain extant holidays. And almost every single one contains an element of that,
mm,
contains an element of, in communities, people putting on what I'll just call disguises rather
uh-huh.
than costumes, and making merry and having revelry, to
Yeah.
have that experience of, some sociologists call it like a pressure release.
Mm,
But I think there's something vital to breaking out of who we are and breaking out of our roles, be that as a child or a parent or a sibling or the baker or the
yeah.
seamstress, whatever our identities are, having an escape from that and seeing how it feels, I
Mhm.
think is incredibly healthy. And we've lost that aspect to almost all of our holidays except
Yeah.
for Halloween,
I
but
was
even
gonna say,
Halloween.
I was gonna say that's why people like Halloween so much. Is people
Yeah.
love dressing up and being someone else, and it's like, hey, you can't actually do that all the time if you want. It's called cosplay, but like that is why
Mhm.
people love Halloween so much.
It's the last bastion of being
Mhm.
able to completely transform,
Yep.
and even just in the most subtle way, like, just like you said, just putting on a mask
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
just knowing, oh, they don't know who I am.
Yeah. Like, why do you think Scream is one of the most iconic horror movies of all time? It's like it's just a guy in a mask. I'm like,
Yeah.
you just the fact that you don't know who he is like sparked this whole franchise. It's one of the most popular masks ever sold ever. It's a very interesting
And I have to say too,
idea.
for those of us in who maybe feel limited or disempowered in some way, I've certainly, like you, experienced that as
Mhm.
someone who's female.
Mm.
And I once was going to an Evanescence concert
Ooh, slay.
and decided to like go all out, and I
Mhm.
put this like really intense black, like almost raccoon like makeup over my
Ooh,
eyes.
I know.
And I took public transportation, and the people, the men who normally would have harassed me in some way,
Mhm.
if I looked at them, they immediately looked down and looked
Good.
away.
Ugh, love that.
And I thought it reminded me of how my cosplay friend felt when she was dressed as Thor. And I was like,
Mm.
I want to put on this scary makeup
Mhm.
every day because women in our society sadly constantly live with the potential threat posed to
Mhm.
us
Mhm.
by by men.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can go about our lives and never actually have something happen, but the threat is there and we
Yeah.
never know when that threat will be acted on or not.
Yeah.
And so we have to behave in a way that doesn't trigger the threat.
Uh-huh.
And that gets suffocating and exhausting.
Yep.
And having that brief moment, even if it's one night when you're in a mask or you look scary or you're dressed as a man and
Mhm.
you get a break
Yeah.
from that, is like such a weight lifted.
Mhm. Yeah, just
And
doing something that doesn't always appeal to, like, the male gaze is very liberating.
they don't know what to make of it.
Mhm. Yeah, it's funny, like, I think, because I do a lot of, like, armor content,
Hmm.
um, and, like, like, a full suit of armor, and it's very, I would say, female gaze. Like, women love a woman in armor. But
Oh, yeah.
when it gets on a side where men are perceiving me in armor, do you know what the most popular kind of comment is? It's men saying how they could still, how easily they could still kill me, even in
Oh,
armor. And it's like, ooh, okay, crazy. Like, boy, that was not the intent. But yeah, thanks for just like still, because even in that brief moment of just seeing a woman on the internet being like physically defended by a plate of armor, they still have to like make sure that you know that they could overpower you and that they
that
could
they have psychotic urges.
yeah, and it's like, whoa, that's a wild thing to say. Like,
Like, let's be clear, this is psychopathic violence you're
Mhm.
talking about.
Mhm, yeah,
Like,
like you're unhinged and you should be on the list, actually. But okay, just
mhm,
internet is forever. I just think you should know that.
yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
Well, it makes me sad that you have to deal with that, but I also really appreciate the energy and the effort that you put into your content
Thank
because
you.
I know that that takes a toll,
Mhm.
and yet you're still doing it. You're still creating these beautiful costumes for us all to admire, and you're still sharing how-to videos and inspiring people to make chainmail and meeting Galadriels.
That was a one-off.
I don't know. I put a plural in there on purpose because maybe one
Cool.
day Kate Blanchett's in your future. Who
I think I
knows?
would
Like,
actually simply pass away. I'm not sure if I can handle that one.
well, is there anything you wanted to share with us in closing? Maybe an upcoming project you're working on or anything you've got planned?
Oh, geez, what do I have going on? Nothing like super notable, like working on. I'm still on my Anastasia sort of. I'm making all of the outfits that she wears in the movie, so I've only got 2 left. That's
Oh
exciting.
my gosh.
Everyone's like, doesn't she only have like 3? I'm like, no, she has 9. She has like 10. She has so many dresses. Yeah, so it's like a current series that I'm working on, but yeah, kind of just gearing up for Ren Fair season is starting soon, so I'll be at the LA Ren Fair. I'm going to the Georgia Ren Fair this year. Colorado is my home fair, and I go to that one like every weekend. So yeah, it's just like the year's just starting to kick off.
And this is going to be a big Tolkien year for us because we
I
have not
know.
only Rings of Power season 2 is
I
rumored to come out this year,
know.
but also War of the Rohirrim,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm really excited about. It's an animated film that's meant to be coming out later this year as well, telling,
Yeah,
I believe, the
very.
story of Helm Hammerhand.
I'm very excited for that one because I've had an Eowyn cosplay on my list for a long time, and it might just be like see, and sometimes like situational. That's how inspiration can strike. It's like, ooh, War of the Rohirrim is coming out. Maybe it's time to make my Eowyn cosplay.
Yeah. Or maybe just a shield maiden,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because I've heard that they might be heavily featured in this film, which I'm really
I
excited by.
can't wait to see.
I know. And isn't it nice to have characters that you can look up to and dress up as who you don't have to gender bend because women exist and
Yes,
women
yeah.
belong in
It's
stories? Like,
fine. I'll stay in my lane. Just give me something. Give me some material.
yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much, Lauren. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on this episode today. And thank you for going on this kind of roller coaster conversation that we went on.
Yeah, if there's one
And
thing I can do is yap, so I'm always happy to talk to you.
no, I feel like I learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience did as well. So, again, Lauren's handles are Lauren Does Cosplay, and I will put the links in the show notes.
Awesome.
So, Lauren, thank you so much.
Yay, thank you so much. I really appreciate being on. Your second guest.
Thank you so very much, dear listener, for joining Lauren and me on that fun exploration of our bond as fellow adventurers in the world of fandom and geekdom, and especially in Middle Earth. As ever, I'm so incredibly thankful and grateful to those of you who take the time to follow this podcast, to share the episodes with your friends and loved ones, and of course, those of you who rate it and give it a review. It is so welcomed. Thank you as well to my supporters on Patreon. The link to have a look around is right here in the show notes. And of course, thank you very much to Lane Thomas, the composer of the score that you hear in this podcast. It is from a track called The Village from his fantasy-themed album, The Lands Beyond. Until next time, may your hearth be warm and your heart be full.